Okay, so what we're looking at this week is one of my favorite topics, and that is the Cold War. And I actually really do enjoy looking at the Cold War because there's so much in here and so much happens during this time. So if you really look at any event in really the late 1940s, 1950s, 1960s, and into the 1970s and 80s, you can't understand that event unless you understand the global dynamic that's happening at the time. So what you first have to understand is that what we're doing is we're positioning two very different economic systems. At the heart of this is two economic systems. But those two economic systems require two very different political systems in order to enforce and really and nurture those economic systems. You can't have basically the different philosophical bases of them without very different political systems. And those, of course, really get to the heart of what the two systems are going to think about: the role of the citizen, the role of the state, the role of property, rights, obligations, responsibilities. All of those things are very different in these two systems. So in terms of those two economic systems, we're talking about communism versus capitalism. And communism is this belief that if you have private property, then private property necessarily will create classes, and classes necessarily will create inequality, and inequality is bad because those who are rich will keep getting richer, and those that are poor will keep getting poorer, and basically all of the things that are good go with those who have power and access and money and property, and that the citizens who are poor without property do not have voice, do not have power, do not have all of these things. So what they're trying to do is they're saying instead there is no private property. All things will be owned by the state collectively, and that what will happen is people will give to the collective good, and then from each according to his ability, to each according to his need. Capitalism takes the absolute opposite approach. They say that the progress of human society depends on private individuals who want to make money and therefore will create the best product for the society. So it is competition and capitalism that will create the best society, and basically the rising tide will lift all boats kind of thing, that the society will get better as everyone is able to make money. Now, in order to have these two things work, you have to have two very different political systems. Communism usually deteriorates into a totalitarian dictatorship. But what you start with is a one-party state. You can't have two parties because already you're going to have two very different approaches, and because everybody's equal and everything is the same, you couldn't possibly have two different ways of looking at this. And because this has to really transcend your entire life, and you can look at what happened in Maoist China, you can look at what happened in Russia, you cannot own things that would suggest that you are of a higher status than somebody else. So what is contained in your apartment, the clothes you wear, all of that kind of stuff must go away. So the government must control all aspects of your lives. But then, this includes religion and free time, by the way, but then as everybody kind of gets on the communist train, what Marx and Engels thought was that the government would eventually wither away. Of course, it never does, as you can look to North Korea, Cuba, and Maoist China and see that the government just gets stronger and stronger. In capitalism, you want to have the lowest amount of government interference in the market that you can. And we, of course, in our political system, teeter and totter back and forth on this because, you know, some parties want more government regulation in order to protect society. Some parties say, no, less government regulation is good because that will that will free up the market, and the market will do what is best. But as we saw in the mortgage crisis, there is a tipping point for that, whether you like it or not. So what we have is we have these two different systems, and they both believe that each is out to take over the world, and if the other one wins, then the world will be doomed forever. They actually think that the other philosophical system is dangerous, and that they are truly in this kind of ideological war. So this is a time when we see, and this is a spy cartoon, we do not trust each other, and that's what this cartoon is getting, because at this time we are fighting a Cold War. We're not using weapons. Now, we are using weapons in different little countries: North Korea, South Korea, Vietnam, throughout Africa. We're going to play proxy or puppet wars, where the USSR is behind one and the USA is behind the other, and we're kind of fighting, but we're fighting through these stand-ins. We each want to contain the other. We had a policy of containment. We will not let communism spread throughout Southeast Asia. We had an arms race. We're going to have more nuclear weapons than you will. Never mind that we could destroy the world 4 or 5 times over. But we're both stockpiling weapons so that this war never, in a way, becomes hot. There's a lot of propaganda. We're trying to make the populations that we control and the ones that we want to control truly believe. So you have a lot of anti-communist propaganda in this country. You have a lot of anti-capitalist propaganda, of course, throughout the giant USSR. You have a lot of espionage, so we're spying on each other all of the time. If you look at any movies from this era, the bad guy is usually the USSR, and it's usually James Bond going out and spying on him. And so you can also tell what's going on in global politics by looking at the movies of the area. And this all amounted to mutual assured destruction. Basically, that we could never ever get to a point where we actually did make this world hot. And I've talked way too long, but the Cold War could be a class in and of itself. And this week, I just want you to kind of get a sense of that. If you can find Tinker, Tailor, Soldier, Spy, great. You might be able to find little clips of it. It was a mini-series for a while, so if you can find little bits of it, that's great. You don't have to watch a lot. You can just kind of get a sense of what it was. And then there was a new one, if you have Netflix, that you might want to watch. But have fun with this week, and I think we're getting ready to go to really start working on our papers, so you will see me lightening up in future weeks as we get closer to those. All right, thanks so much. Bye-bye.